Hey everyone, this is Felix. Welcome to my new podcast, To Felix with Love. Just to start, to give everyone an idea of what this is going to be all about, the overarching theme is how the lack of representation, knowledge, and education around normalizing Black gay love in the Black community during our younger years impacts how we navigate sex, dating, and love as adults. So what was really important to me first on my journey was the fact that self-love is so important. We talk about this all the time. And I believe that the first step in the journey to self-love is connecting with your inner child. There's actually this little activity that one of my spiritual advisors, yes, I use spiritual advisors, one of them gave me. And you know how the example was when you see something crazy happen, like a car accident, and you like grab your diaphragm, like, oh my gosh. That is a way that you connect with your inner child as well. So this little activity, if you just place your hands on your abdomen on top of each other, and for me, I would stand in the mirror and say, Felix, I'm loving you. I'm loving you, Felix. And say it like 21 times and do it for 21 days. And what that does, aside from connecting with your inner child, it is raising your vibrations. And we all know, like law of attraction, like attracts like attracts like. And when your vibrations are high, you only attract high vibrational things. So furthermore with that, connecting with your inner child, I began to look at how you may live your life for other people. Not the best thing to do at all. Obviously, we know that from psychologists, everyone. But instead of living your life for your parents or your spouse or your kids or whomever that may be that's important to you, what if you live your life for yourself? And not even just yourself, but what if you navigated your life in a way that you did everything every day to make that little, for me, the little boy inside, that 3-year-old, how would that make him feel? Everything that I do throughout my life, the right jobs, the people that I know, the people that I date, the experiences that I have, if I end each day and think, what would that little boy say to me and how would he feel? That's that journey of self-love and like understanding how to live from a place of love and acceptance. So going back to the why of this podcast, it's not just about how being a Black gay man and boy growing up, accepting himself and understanding what my path is going to look like through that journey of self-love and love overall. The first thing you also have to think about and understand is, what is love? Whether it's love of self, love of things, love of people, all those things. And one book that I would recommend everyone to read is All About Love, New Visions by Bell Hooks. It really goes through and dissects how operating our lives with a love ethic can literally change the world. And, it will divest us from patriarchy. It will remove systemic racism and all those horrible things that we need to work on in this world. So one thing that Bell mentions in the book is in regards to romantic love, which is something that what we'll talk about mostly on this podcast, is understanding what that looks like. So there's a term called cathexis. And cathexis is actually that the concentration of mental energy on one particular person, idea, or object. And in this context, it's that focusing that mental energy on one person. And it's the moment when you have that connection, like a spiritual connection or a physical connection, and you get the butterflies in your stomach, and you get excited when they text you, and all that fun stuff that we love to do. But That's not love, and most people confuse that with love. Love isn't the butterflies in your stomach and that spiritual connection. Love is involved in those things. There are aspects of love in those things, but the actual concept of love is an action. Love is actually the will to nurture your own and another's spiritual growth. That's something to think about. So once we understand what love is, then we can move on to what love does. Now, going back to this whole journey of mine, I'll tell everyone a little story. Story time. So I always knew that I was gay. I probably knew at like 2, 3, 4, something like that. That moment happened for me. I was in my little after school program or something, little program I went to. And there was this guy, I think his name was Trevor. But anyway, this was like in 1980 something. And we were all, I was playing with the kids, and he was like one of the instructors, and we were outside in a little playground area. And I started getting this tingly feeling. And I was looking at him, and the one thing that was really striking to me was his Adam's apple. He had a very pronounced, protruding Adam's apple. And that was attractive to me for some reason. By the way, this was a white man too. He probably was like 19 or 20, but I was, again, I don't know, 4 or 5. But that's when I knew, like, that's when it clicked for me that I like men. But because of the way that I was raised, and my household was I didn't grow up in a strict household. I hope my mom doesn't feel a certain way about me saying that. But I had an amazing childhood because I was raised with my mom, my grandparents, and my grandmother specifically always gave me this feeling of like I could just be whoever I wanted to be, do whatever I wanted to do. I mean, I'll tell us later more about my grandma and my experience of coming out and all that. But my grandma actually put me on to that show Queer as Folk, and we would watch it and sit there and like the men would be having sex, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, there's no way I could see this, and I can't believe she's just getting a kick out of this. But anyway, so because I never felt like there was anything wrong with being gay, I never questioned it. So from the very beginning as a child, I knew this is just what it was, and I thought it was normal. And when I thought about what I wanted my future to look like, I would watch these romantic comedies, this white woman, damsels in distress, likes the boy, whatever, they fall in love, all that. I looked at that and I said, oh, that's going to be me one day. I'm going to have that fairy tale. That's my story. Even though they didn't look like me, I just believe because that's all I saw in that context, in the media, I believe that could be me too. It wasn't until I became an adult when I talked to other people, other black gay men, that say, well, aside from the church, which that'll be a whole nother episode, my family and how they speak about gay people and the homophobia that runs rampant in the black community, I also didn't see any men together in a loving way. So I didn't have any examples of that. So if I only see a man and a woman, I don't think that's an option for me. So that was really shocking. And again, I didn't realize that till I was an adult. I thought the way that I lived was normal. I thought everybody was like, oh, you know you like boys, you know you like girls, you go on your merry way and you live your life happily ever after. But that's just not the way it is, unfortunately. And at 40, I can say I'm so thankful and grateful for the experiences I had. And again, I can look back to that little boy. Now, I'm not saying that things were perfect for me because I had that acceptance. I started everything really early. So, like most that you would ask, started in their 20s, maybe when they started college, 18, 19. I started at, 15, technically 13, but I started really early because I always knew what I wanted. So on to like what that journey looked like for me in connecting with men. if you're of a certain age, you'll remember AOL. Many of you may not be that age and may not know what that is. But AOL was like the internet for us in the 90s. So that was the only place I had access to talking to men. So at the young, ripe age of 13, and again, my mom would die and will probably die in her mind when she hears all of this. But because I knew I wanted to live my fairy tale, I'm going to find this fairy tale. I want to know what this experience is like. I want to know what sex is like. So now I have access to it. I'm going to just do it. So I go on AOL, and there were these chat rooms. It was like men for men. So there was like, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. So there's like a Richmond, Virginia men for men room. And I would go in there and talk to these men, mostly white men. Now, my only experience with liking a white man was when I was that 4 or 5 years old in after school care. That is never anything that I would want to explore. Sorry to anyone that I might offend. But we'll talk about that on another episode too, interracial dating, and my thoughts on that. But I've always wanted black men, aside from my little 5-year-old experience. So I'm in this room talking to mostly white men, and I actually come across a black man who is what I would say probably 40, and I was 13, 14. I was chatting with him. I hope I don't get anybody in trouble. He was a teacher at one of the local high schools, and I live right by the park, so I said, "Oh, I want to meet you." Again, I know people are probably like, this is like getting into like statutory and molestation territory, but we can talk about that too at another time. But this is something that I actively was seeking. He wasn't taking advantage of me. He wasn't preying on me. Yes, he did know how old I was because I was very honest about that by a couple years. I think I might have said I was 16, but I'm very tall and I've been tall, so that was believable to most. But when we were chatting, I said, I want to meet you, live near the park. So he said, oh, I'll come to the park. Got on my little bicycle, put on some little, I'll never forget these shorts. It's like these little polo sport, blue, like biker shorts, and like a little polo t-shirt, a little polo hat. You know, I thought I was doing it back in the day. So I rolled up to the park, and I was so nervous. Like, my heart was jumping out of my chest. But I said to myself, like, this is something I really want to do. I just want to see what this is like. I just want this man to, like, hold my hand or something. And like, maybe he'll take me on a date, and maybe we'll fall in love. Well, little did I know, those weren't the things that he had on his mind. So I roll up, we start talking, and he pretty much wanted to have some sexual exploration with this 13-year-old, and I might have been 15, but between 13 and 15. He wanted to explore sex with me. He wanted to have the sex. So yes, I did want to, but I was young and I was scared. I think I let him kiss me. Yeah, I let him kiss me. It wasn't what I expected. I wasn't really attracted to him, but none of those things made any difference because I just wanted to talk to a man and touch a man and see what that was like. So that was my first experience, and then it just went uphill from there. I think the first time that I actually engaged in a deeper way with the man was, I definitely was 15, about to turn 16. I was riding the school bus. We met in one of those chat rooms on AOL. He was 19, and I told him I would meet him after I meet him at my house. Sorry, mommy. Told him I would meet him at the house after I got out of school. So literally, I'm on the school bus, getting off the school bus. I remember my outfit too. I had on, it was a Gap outfit. There were these stretch khakis and a little brown and tan plaid button-up shirt and some black alligator, whatever brand shoes, patent leather. I love those shoes, by the way. Um, so I get off the bus. He's sitting in front of my house. This will probably mean something to y'all that are a certain age. He had a gold Acura Legend. So I was like, oh, okay, gotcha. So we walked into the house and there was not much conversation. It was very awkward. I felt very awkward. He was very awkward. He was very nerdy too, which I thought was kind of cute in a way. But I didn't really, at 15, I didn't really have a thorough concept and idea of the man that I wanted to be with. So I kind of was like, okay, he's fine. He's gay and he's black. I'll take it. So we went in the house, and I'll spare you the details, but I thought we had sex, but we actually didn't because there was no, how can I say this? He was grinding on me, and I felt like that was what the sex was. But about 6 months later, I found out that that was not sex. It was nowhere near it because, as many of you may know, your first time isn't pleasurable and it's painful. But anyway, so I was on AOL, long story short, I was on AOL finding men, talking to men all over the place. Because at this point, I was just really comfortable with this concept that I'm going to find my Prince Charming, even though I was so young. So as I started to explore and meet different men, by the way, most of them were all over 21 and I was still under 18. Again, I will have a more in-depth conversation about that type of situation that happens. But it was very common back then. This was the 90s and the internet was new. People, I don't think crazy people had made it to the internet yet. So I wasn't even afraid of somebody like kidnapping me or molesting me because that wasn't even happening yet. They were still doing that in the park and like snatching people up or whatever. So it felt like a safe space, but where it became rocky was, again, I'm this young kid out here living free, happy to be who I am, accepting myself for what it is, not questioning being gay or anything like that. But I'm encountering these men that have all this trauma from the church and their family and patriarchy and homophobia all, all together, wrapped up in one. And they're imposing these things on me. So I'm coming to them like, hey, want to go on a date? And they're like, a date? We're men. We don't date. That's not something we do. Do you want to have sex or no? I'm like, okay, I guess I'll have sex then. That's my only option, right? So, and again, these men were in their 20s. There's one in particular that would want me to come over his house. And I would lie and say I was going over my friend's house, but I was actually going over his house. And we would have sex, and then he would take me to the mall and buy me sneakers. I was not a prostitute. I was just a kid trying to explore and navigate my world. And again, I'm just trying to figure this all out, and I have no one to talk to about this. No one. I can't talk to my mom. I can't talk to my grandma. And I can't talk to my friends. All my friends are, well, straight at that point. All of them. But, yeah, it was just me. I felt alone. And, again, going back to this overarching theme of this podcast, I don't want anybody to feel like they're alone. I've lived my life, and I've had lots of experiences. Anyone out there that's listening, I don't want you to have to go through what I went to Like they say, I crawl so you can walk. When I say I crawl, I crawled and was dragged through the dirt and the mud and anything that you can imagine. So I just want to share my story with you. So maybe one day somebody else out there doesn't have to go through the same thing. And not that I had horrible experiences, I had lots of learning experiences. I did have some traumatic experiences too that I will discuss as well because I think that's all helpful. And I'm a very open person. I do believe that your story may help, even if it just helps one person in the world. It's something that we need to put out there. So that's why I'm doing this. And I also want to hear your stories. So I will be having guests talking about lots of things. As I mentioned, we'll talk about interracial dating. We'll talk about what many say alternative relationships, but they shouldn't be alternative. There's lots of ways you can be in a relationship, and there's not just one way. Also, talking about examples in the media and how we're portrayed as Black gay men, even today. If you watch Tyler Perry, or I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now of naming all these people that put out work that poorly displays us. And I'm not going to talk about Dave Chappelle because I've already done that. If you look at my IG, I did a 10-minute video about my thoughts on that. Dave Chappelle special. Nothing's really changed. We're still in the same place. Where we were, that experience I was having in the 90s, it's 2021 now, and we're going to 2022 and beyond. We have a lot of work to do to change. We're also going to talk about how important it is to have straight allies and how important it is for us to understand that being Black is always first and we're gay second. And when you take that approach, you navigate your life in a different way and hopefully not seeking the approval of white men, because that's a whole other thing, but we'll get into it. We'll also talk about love for trans men and trans women, because that's something, from my standpoint, being a Black gay man, I had bad examples of what that looks like. They didn't have any. So I want to not only use this platform for me to share my story, my experiences, and to connect with people that are like me, but also to give other people that space too. Because I really think, again, being 40, my life has changed completely in a different way. I look at things totally differently than I used to. And just because something doesn't affect me or it's not my experience doesn't mean that I shouldn't have an understanding of it, and I shouldn't connect with those people and their experiences as well, because one little nugget from somebody can help you. But I'm just talking about Black people though, make that very clear. So definitely reach out to me so we can discuss lots of things. You can share your story. We can do Q&As. I can even give advice because, like I said, I've been through it all. So everything's not been so pretty, and some things have. So I would love to continue to dissect these experiences and hope to elevate us all and get us to a different place. Operate from an ethic of love in everything that you do. And something else that Bell Hooks mentioned in All About Love, New Visions, she referenced M. Scott Peck's famous book, The Road Less Traveled, which is all about a journey of spirituality. And he said, we do not have to love, we choose love. And I'm always going to choose love. So thank you so much for joining me. Look forward to connecting with you again.